Folks who went before us blazed the trail through history. The heritage they left behind is part of you and me. All the dreams they still live on, and it makes me proud to be a living, breathing part of it all, the American legacy.
Here in the northwest corner of our country is some of the most impressive scenery that you will ever experience. Douglas and white fir trees, western hemlock and cedar, giants of this region's forests. Here also is Mount Rainier, Washington, over 14,000 feet in elevation, a towering, inactive volcano of the Cascade Mountain Range. For waterfalls, well, 620 feet is certainly an awesome drop at Multnomah Falls, the water ending up in yet another geographic spectacle, the Columbia River. This is one of our country's most important waterways. The Columbia drains much of the northwest, carrying off moisture in the form of rain and snowfall downstream some 1,200 miles before emptying itself into the Pacific Ocean. Not only does the river act as part of the Oregon-Washington state boundary line, but in places provides through hydroelectric dams much of the electricity needed by this region's cities and industries. Cargo ships travel up and down this great waterway all year long, thanks to a system of locks by each dam that can raise or lower the ocean-going tugs and barges to the next water level. It's been almost 200 years since the river was discovered by Captain Robert Gray, a sea trader from Boston. While exploring along the coastline of this region, Gray laid claim to the river for the United States, later naming the great unexplored waterway after his ship, the Columbia. During his brief stay at the mouth of the river, Gray offered trade goods to the friendly Indians in exchange for hundreds of valuable furs of the sea otter and the beaver. Such news of profitable fur trading spread quickly to both American and British ports. It marked the beginning of a long, continuous struggle between England and the United States over control of the Columbia River and the land that came to be known as Oregon country.
Washington, D.C., April 18th, 1803. To Meriwether Lewis, Captain of the 1st Regiment of Infantry of the United States of America. The object of your mission is to explore the lands and
President Thomas Jefferson had no intention of letting the Oregon country be taken over by England. His letter to Captain Lewis set in motion an expedition that would not only explore the newly acquired Louisiana Territory, but would help strengthen our nation's claim to the Oregon land as well, by exploring on foot the region of the Columbia River. For over 2 years, Meriwether Lewis and his good friend Captain William Clark traveled up and down rivers, across plains, through mountains and valleys, exploring and mapping the land while recording carefully each experience in their journals.
October 21, 1805. We landed near a small Indian village this morning. The Indians received us with great kindness and examined everything they saw with much attention. In their appearance, as in their language, they do not differ from those higher up the river. November 7, 1805. We had not gone far when the fog cleared, and we enjoyed the delightful prospect of the ocean. This cheering view exhilarated the spirits of all the party, who were still more delighted on hearing the distant roar of the breakers.
Captain Clark's Journal, March 23, 1806.
At this place we wintered and remained from the 7th of December, 1805 to this day, and have lived as well as we had a right to expect.
It was called Fort Clatsop, named for the friendly Clatsop Indians that lived close by in those early years. Here near the mouth of the Columbia River, the expedition spent the winter months preparing for their long return journey homeward. Many of the days were spent hunting wild game, especially elk. Elk not only provided food for members of the expedition, but the hides could later be dressed out into clothing, such as the pullover tunic, the trousers, even the moccasins. Beaver fur, of course, provided the hat. One of the weapons they used to hunt with was this Harper Ferry 1803 short rifle. Lewis and Clark brought 15 of these special experimental rifles with them on the expedition. To fire it, well, first you put in a special amount of powder down the barrel, placed a piece of cloth or patch over that, used a rifle ball this size, put that on top, and rammed it down the bore. To prime the rifle, place another bit of powder here, close the pan, cock the rifle, take aim, and there was even a salt-making camp set up near the ocean to boil seawater. It produced about 3 quarts of salt each day. The 2 leaders were kept busy exploring and reworking their journals, adding new maps and hundreds of observations of the land, the Indians, the plant and animal life. And on March 23rd, 1806, Lewis and Clark finally began their long return journey back to St. Louis. The expedition not only was hailed a great success, but more importantly, the United States could now lay claim to this Oregon country. The claim in turn would later encourage the great pioneer movement that helped settle the West during the 1800s. At first, there were the fur trappers, mountain men like Jedediah Smith, James Beckworth, Jim Bridger, trapping the streams and rivers, finding new trails through the rugged wilderness. Then appeared the first tiny settlements on well-worn pathways, missionary camps, trading posts, scattered widely, sending back east news of free land in Oregon country, a chance for a better life out west. Finally, in the 1840s, came the first of the many groups of pioneers willing to take that chance. They started out from Independence, Missouri, on the 2,000-mile journey with all of their belongings packed in what was called a prairie schooner. They followed one of history's most famous pathways. 1843, from Jesse Applegate's journal as he traveled the Oregon Trail.
It is 4 a.m. The sentinels on duty have discharged their rifles, the signal that the hours of sleep are over. Every wagon and tent is pouring forth its night's tenants, and slow kindling smoke begins to rise. 60 men start from the corral, and by 5 o'clock they have begun to move the herd of 5,000 cattle and horses toward camp. On the strike of 7, the leading platoon moves out, while the rest of the encampment fall into their places. The journey continues.
From 1841 until the first transcontinental railroad was completed in 1869, over 350,000 people used the trail in moving west. And not all of them completed the journey. Hunger, sickness, even death took its toll during the 5 to 6 months of traveling to Oregon country. From here at what is called the Dalles, located by the Columbia River, the pioneers would go downstream in boats or on rafts, and then head south into the Willamette Valley. Here in Oregon country, they found not only fertile soil on which to farm, but some of the most abundant forests anywhere on the continent. Timber was a resource that would make this region the nation's leading producer of lumber. Logging has changed a good deal over the years. No longer do they cut the tops off these giant Douglas firs before they bring them down. Today, the entire tree is cut and felled in one tremendous sight. Here in the western parts of Oregon and Washington, commercial timber companies will cut entire hillsides of trees at one time. It's called clear cutting. It has proved to be one of the best economical methods of harvesting a crop of trees, especially on such steep hillsides as these. And even though it looks unsightly, once the land is cleared of logs and limbs, it won't be long before what we call reforestation will start putting back new trees to replace those that you see cut. In fact, we are finally learning how to harvest our forests. to replant them, to harvest them again, so that we can have a continuous source of timber year after year. From these cones, of course, come the seeds for a new forest, a handful providing hundreds of new trees. Nature has its own way of reforestation, of releasing the seeds, of ensuring random growth within a forest. The trouble is that nature's way is very slow, sometimes uncertain. Man's way is much quicker, almost guaranteed. Here in vast outdoor nurseries, seeds become seedlings, the beginnings of new trees for new forests. And after 1 or 2 years of constant care and attention, they will find themselves being carried in the knapsacks of men replanting entire areas of cut-over hillsides. The seedlings need little more than having the earth opened up, a good placement of its root system, and then a firm foot to close the earth around it. Nature will do the rest, providing 80 to 100 inches of rain in these western areas of Washington and Oregon. Finally, it's time for logs to become lumber, to be cut, edged, trimmed, and sorted into standard lengths, a process that begins here on this huge movable piece of equipment. The end result of a cut forest. Millions of board feet of lumber, stacked, wrapped, waiting for shipment to all parts of our country and even other countries. Lumber, however, is only one of the many products that comes to us from the Northwest. The region is well known for its crops of grain, especially wheat. It's the apple kingdom of America, providing us with one of our favorite fruits. They even manufacture jet airliners in this one of the largest buildings in the world. Here in Everett, Washington, north of Seattle, is one of Boeing's 2 major aircraft manufacturing centers in Washington, employing more than 68,000 workers. Below is the final assembly line for the fuel-efficient 767. Like automobiles or even bicycles, airplanes are assembled here by putting together their many parts, parts of every description. High-strength metal alloys, cloth, rubber, plastics, even new composite materials are used in building these aircraft. Here the last of over 3 million separate parts from over 1,300 different suppliers around the world are put in place on each new aircraft. From the time that the fuselage begins to take shape at one end of the building until the finished airliner is rolled out the other end for final flight testing, thousands of men and women have riveted, bolted, wired, painted, and secured every part and piece of the aircraft. It took Lewis and Clark 6 months to travel from here in the Northwest back to St. Louis. Today, the journey can be made in this 767 in a little over 3 hours' time. Sometimes I think this modern world of ours travels too fast. Perhaps we're missing much of what Lewis and Clark saw in this country of ours. I wonder if they had the chance whether Lewis and Clark would exchange 1806 for the 20th century. Or better yet, would you exchange places with them? Or with the courageous pioneers that traveled the Oregon Trail? It's an interesting thought. Think about it.